Welcome to Subject to Power. I'm El Kamihira. Now, with over one full generation of human beings having been raised with smartphones and experiencing so much of life through the internet and social media, it's obvious that the presence of the World Wide Web has profoundly changed childhood and adolescence. Whereas the sphere of influence on a child that was once limited to family and close social circle is now expanded to include just a boundaryless world of ideas and values, some of which are destructive, dark, and inhumane. In particular, the effects of online pornography and the manosphere on the developing minds of boys and young men have been a cause for concern for a long time. My guest on today's episode, Michael Conroy, found himself smack in the middle of this cultural moment in his native England, where he spent 16 years in secondary schools coordinating and delivering a wide variety of citizenship, personal development, and well-being programs for young students. In 2021, frustrated with the quality of the existing programs, Michael founded Men at Work, which is an innovative and modern take on the Socratic method, a philosophy that uses ongoing dialogue to develop critical thinking skills. He designed Men at Work as a structured training tool for anyone who works closely with boys and young men in schools and colleges, youth services, etc. And it features dialogue modules on themes such as male friendships, the value of money, respect and disrespect in relationships, and a whole lot more. In this hour, Michael and I talk about the art of fostering a positive vision for boys and young men and why it matters to everyone. Thank you so much for coming on. I'm really looking forward to this conversation. I don't know if you know, but I don't have a lot of men on my show. It's very women-centric. So I really appreciate the courage.
Oh, well, yeah. I hope it won't be tested too severely, yeah.
Not at all. And the work that you're doing is just so interesting to me. So maybe we'll start there, like how you came to this work.
Yeah, okay. Sometimes it's quite hard to kind of really identify real catalysts because sometimes you're not aware of them.
Sure.
So you find things that look like obvious moments, but there was always going to be stuff leading up to that, maybe like threads that are just starting to kind of knit together. Certainly it came out of the work I was doing in secondary high school in England for 16 years or so, between 2004 and 2021, which is when I finally stopped doing that at all. And I think really it was because the job that I had working for a group of high schools was very much about trying to find out what was going on in the lives of young people, making sure that we had provision to meet that, keeping an eye on things like the emergence of smartphones and all of that world and that hinterland, and just kind of coming across increasing safeguarding issues that certainly say 2015 onward, when the boundaries between school and home or school and the outside world started to melt, partly through technology, partly through increasing use of the internet. And so I was kind of called upon to do some intervention work with teenage boys, 14s, 15s, who were, behaving in ways that were scary or problematic, or you could see them going in dark paths one way or another. And just getting to know a lot of them, really, because I wasn't a classroom teacher, so I didn't know them so well. I was seeing them because of what had happened and what they'd done. I suppose it was a wake-up call of what was going on in the lives of 13, 14-year-old boys.
And they were coming to you for like violence prevention sort of thing or behavioral issues?
It was more after the fact. It was that something had gone wrong, or some class tutors or pastoral workers were worried or concerned about what boys were saying or what was appearing on their phones, what they were sharing, or just stuff that was going on at home. Maybe, I discovered that an unusually higher number, well, let me say a higher number than I expected of boys, young men, were living as victims of domestic abuse. And that kind of sets off all kinds of possibilities and concerns and obligations for adults who know that to do what they can to kind of support with whatever means you've got available. And, schools are limited in a lot of ways and have a lot of expectations placed on them.
But always with boys?
No, absolutely not. That became the case. It became the case as a response to kind of intuiting what was changing in the life of young people and the increase in incidences of worrying behaviour by boys and young men. And that whole kind of spectrum of behaviours towards women and girls, certainly female teachers and girls in class, but also finding out about their behaviour towards their mums, their sisters, maybe, but also intra-male, male to male bullying, homophobic language, that kind of traditional world of trying to dominate other males to, establish your credentials. But then also increasingly, I was also doing a lot of training around mental health awareness, self-harm, suicidal ideation, which I've spent, quite a bit of time studying and training in suicide prevention and stuff. And it just seemed that there was an emerging case for doing more earlier with boys and young men.
So you began this organization, Men at Work. How did that come about then?
It was through trying to find resources, trying to find more than the odd TED Talk or something to play, something to watch, something to respond to in the group work with boys and young men. There was very little. And despite the enormously increased discourse, there still is very little, actually, in terms of concrete resources. Certainly, that feels relevant in Britain because a lot of the stuff has been historically US, Canadian, or Australian. And so it didn't feel like it was part of the vernacular of England in a way. And a lot of the language I found really off-putting about heroes, champions, ambassadors, good men, great men. In English, we say blowing smoke up your own arse. I don't know if that translates well, but it seemed to be about trying to make the reason for getting involved in deconstructing kind of sexism, misogyny, male violence against women and girls, and male violence more broadly. It tried to appeal to like a heroic ideal. And I just felt that was off-putting. And there's an organisation called the White Ribbon, which is, somewhat known around the world. It started in Canada. I'm sure it started with great intentions, but it's prone to that kind of, look at me, I'm going to sign a pledge and I'm going to wear a badge. I just wanted to simplify everything and make it no frills, basically. And I just thought it's about the work. It's not about the person. So I spent a year or so volunteering for the White Ribbon in the UK, just because I thought that was a vehicle for doing something useful. And I think a lot of men do that with good intention. But it was like you walk down a corridor and you come out the other end and you think, is that it? Is that it, really? We're just going to promise not to be abusive. And at the same time, I was learning from women who I'd started doing bits of work with or inviting to schools and finding out about domestic abuse perpetrator kind of modes of operation, that promise not to abuse is actually part of the cycle of abuse. And to this day, I can't understand how it's not so glaringly obvious, even to the men who do it, that of course you're going to promise not to be abusive. I mean, what kind of schmuck wouldn't? and I know of men who are abusive who've made those public pledges. And it doesn't mean that everybody does it is doing it for bad intention. It just means that it's a very easy thing to game and to gain kudos in your own social circles, whether it's local council, local government, sports teams, fire service, police.
Yeah.
I've spoken to police officers, fire firefighters and lots of local government people, local authority, who say to me, we are accredited by this organisation. And they say, my colleagues, I know they're coercive controllers. I know they use prostituted women. I know they do all this stuff. And then they stand there and have the photographs taken. And it's just, I mean, it drives me insane, as I'm sure it drives lots of people insane. But it's basically the only game in town in Britain. And I think that's really sad stuff. So I thought, what's the opposite of that thing that I'm disappointed in? And it felt like, well, it's probably no photographs, no promises, not doing it just for like the 16 days of action, or, you know, just doing it all the time as much as you can, in as steady a way as you can, in as unglamorous a way as you can, with developing minds of boys and young men.
So it must have occurred to you, though, working with these adult men or looking at these adult men, that you have to start before you get to this point.
Yeah,
I feel
looking at myself as well.
Yeah.
Absolutely, because I've lived my life. I was I'm a very late starter. I was 12 years ago before I started doing anything in a formalised way, in a way that wasn't just going about your daily business, if you like, in a way of thinking, actually, should we get some of the year 10 lads together and talk to them? And it was like, oh, shit, this is like a revolutionary thought, because we can tell them off and we can punish them and put them in detention and ground them and all of that stuff forever. And that's just low-level things happening in school. So it was the only thing I could come up with. I thought, what can I do with whatever time I've got that doesn't take money away from vital women's frontline services, to kind of connect schools with all kinds of charities, food banks, homeless organisations, refugees, domestic abuse speakers on particular days, all that, to knit the school and the community and what's going on nationally, and invite speakers in to do assemblies. So I did a lot of assemblies, and that's like 300-400 kids in a room quietly for 10-15 minutes. And that is in no way, shape or form a dialogue.
Yeah.
So after the assemblies, you'd find out that if one or two had gone down really badly, or they'd kind of impacted some of the kids in ways we hadn't thought about it properly in advance. So it was just a lot of, I wish I'd known that before, kind of kicking yourself constantly. And it was just kind of trial and error. I was on the inside in schools, buying that in, trying to find out were they any good, picking up the odd phone call from parents or staff going, now, they're a bit weird, mate. And I'm thinking, shit, what have I done? Because I was looking to find stuff. In 2014, I signed up with Stonewall UK because I was concerned about lesbophobic bullying in schools. And I thought, we don't talk about it. We never say the word. So in England at that time, they were the go-to organisation, and I didn't know anything about them apart from historically they'd done good stuff. Boy, was I wrong. I was persuading other schools to sign up, and they were very good, Stonewall. They made such a good business. You wouldn't think they could make so much money so quickly, but boy, they're really good at it. So, and a lot of it was getting schools to sign up to be a Stonewall school, a champion school. So you get it on the website, it looks like you're doing something, all of that stuff. And also at the same time, it felt like you were really doing something for your gay kids. You know, like you were making them visible and listened to, and it felt good. But then I started looking at what they were doing on social media, and the materials that were coming in suddenly went, like 2015, it was a volte-face. That was because of their decision making that year when Ruth Hunt was the CEO, and it suddenly went totally different for reasons we might explore later. Anyway, So I was able to see from the inside what these organisations were about, what they were saying, what their materials were like, all kinds of stuff, homelessness, anti-violence, knife crime, all kinds of stuff. So it was a great job, to be honest, and I loved working with kids. But I started to realise that a lot of the stuff that was coming to school was just garbage on two fronts. One, that there wasn't really anything I could get my hands on and get my teeth into about working with boys and young men, like really good structures, things that felt optimistic and meaningful and relevant to them. But on the other side, I was looking at stuff that was kind of the antithesis of that and inherently homophobic, lesbophobic, and sexist, which was all the gender ideology, pro self ID stuff, which ran amok in English schools, in Scottish and Irish and Welsh and Northern Irish, and no doubt US and Canada. Let's talk about Canada. But it was like an explosion of the capitalist Wild West. Ultimately, that's what it's about, is schools are expected to deliver a lot of heavy content of stuff about sex, about relationships, about health, and about X and Y and Z, and teach them maths, English, science, French within this kind of narrow time frame. And the teachers who deliver it are French teachers, maths teachers, physical education teachers. No criticism of them at all, because this is the way our governments successively always have chosen to do it. Also, I've realised by asking colleagues, would you mind delivering this assembly? I've got some materials here. Are you able to talk to year 8, year 9 about porn or about this, that and the other? And I just wish I'd known what I know now, is that some of them were victim survivors of what they are asked to talk to children about. That's messed up. That's a safeguarding fail in itself. Can you talk to this group of potentially disrespectful, let me say, irreverent 14-year-olds about a subject that you might not be able to sleep the night before because you're thinking about it? It's a tough gig because they're going to call you a pedo or a nonce anyway, because that's the way that a lot of young people operate, to try and diffuse the tension of having an adult talking to them about this stuff. And you think, can we not do this better? Anyway, I hope I've not gone way, way off topic, but that's how I ended up doing this sort of work, by working with kids, young people, and sort of being really curious about how does this stuff come through the school gates? Where's it coming from? What's the cultural soil that it grows from? But also, wow, what a tough gig being 14, 15, 13 now when you live your life online. When you're judged constantly, you've got to be attractive. You're using filters. People are kind of voting you up, voting you down, freezing you out, all that stuff, and not getting enough sleep. This kind of bomb exploding on our watch, and thinking the people who really are benefiting from this, the billionaires, they simply don't care. Safeguarding is not on their agenda at all. So who's doing the work? What's happening here? And you lose your faith and your confidence in organizations and authority.
So you created something, obviously, to like counter this bomb explosion, something that was more useful, that would reach.
That's what I want to do. That's what I wanted to do, is to see what could be done that was not showy, that other people who I was working with could do as well. I just think that if you can demystify and make people who are in a good position, because they know the boys and young men, they're their teachers, their teaching assistants, their pastoral support, if they know them, rather than these strangers who come from outside, do their performance, go away, and then they take the money from the schools, which are short of funds anyway, and the schools can say, we've done that, tick. I was just thinking, what is the opposite of that? And it's just, well, he's just talking in a room. And because I had some really amazing conversations early on with boys, young men, and just thinking, wow, I didn't know that. That's amazing. I've been barking up the wrong tree. I didn't understand. You're really insightful. Of course you are, because it's you. You are you at this moment, and you are breathing this in. It's not a teaching thing. It's an asking thing. It's a learning thing.
Mm-hmm.
If it works, it's an approach for teachers, youth workers, social workers, mental health counsellors, anybody whose work, whether it's paid or voluntary,
with dialogue at its center.
Absolutely, yeah. There's a framework, so it's not just talk to the boys, because I don't think anybody would pay me to tell them that. But there's a framework, but it's very much questions about the nature of respect, the nature of friendship, questions about the value of money, the meaning of money to men in our culture now. What does money mean? How much is enough money? Are we safe or are we vulnerable? In what ways are we safe? In what ways are we vulnerable? It's just it's like peeling an onion with no end.
Yeah.
But hopefully the onion is misinformation, wrong knowledge, prejudice, etc. And we're peeling those away, revealing something of value in the middle. But it's all about, for me, in any case, it's about learning how to ask questions in a way that isn't just killing time before you say what you wanted to say before. It's like genuinely asking questions, because as a professional in a safeguarding capacity, which anybody is who is an adult, you know, in the presence of children, and the way I see it is safeguarding has to be dynamic because risk evolves, risk mutates. So therefore, our safeguarding has to do the same. It has to keep up. It has to be modern. It has to be of now. Not saying that risks are all brand new, because nothing new under the sun. Nothing new that Andrew Tate says isn't that been said 5,000 years ago. Nothing new on adolescence that wasn't true decades ago. There's nothing new exactly, but knowing how it works and the intensity and all of that sort of stuff, I think it's an obligation for adults who work with young people, and parents as well, of course, parents and carers, to find out and to show up. And I'm not sure what order that comes in, whether it's you show up in the lives of boys and young men so you can find out, or you find out, like you try and get clued up, try and learn about what's going on and kind of experiences that they have. And then you can show up as a reliable and supportive adult in their life. But in any case, I think there's a duty to be informed and to be constantly trying to keep abreast of what's happening, and to be an available presence, a safe, available presence, persistent, maybe a little bit boring at times, maybe, but something solid that they at least know is there, and to listen and not to judge.
You do talk about questioning in this dialogue, kind of questioning where they pick up their values from. Is that a big part of where they get their ideas and values from?
If you've got a group, which is why I like group work, because you've got different lives. There's commonality. They're all male. They're all within a certain age range, usually if it's in a school setting, usually. But kind of commonality masks difference. You know, it's a banal thing to say, but, you know, some of them will have got a fairly easy, happy, healthy home life. Others, absolutely not. But they're all there. They're all wearing a school uniform. They all got the same haircut. They all like the same football teams. But their worlds are different inside. So it's kind of like trying to find out what the world has given them, what it's offering them, what it's expecting from them, and how do they coalesce or not around these things, because it seems to be like the human condition for boys, as it is for women and men and girls, to gather around ideas, because a culture in it, I guess, you know, like shared meaning, and to recreate what was there before, and to, or at least if you're going to change it in a way that is within acceptable bounds to the others. So it's all about social norms.
Sure.
So hopefully the work that I do and the training that I offer is about being able to talk about social norms, aka unwritten rules, so we don't get into jargon. It's like unwritten rules, and being safe for you, for yourself. This is a phrase I use a lot in work, is it's about being safe and safe to be around.
Mm-hmm.
At the same time, indivisibly, I find I need two separate phrases for that. Be safe, but your safety matters because you're a human being and you're vulnerable and complex and you're not the finished article. Also, at the same time, and I wish I could say the sentence in one word, but I can't, we collectively as men represent a risk factor that history tells us is categorically so, globally, always so, undeniably, immutably, up to now. It just is. We represent a risk, and partly it's because of our aggregate strength differential.
Sure.
Who knew?
Reality.
And partly because of the structures that we've created on the basis of that physical and cultural structures and legal and religious and military and all of that we've created. So it's the power that comes from power, cultural that comes from the physical over millennia. Quite. Oh gosh, how did I get onto that? Right.
It's safe to be around,
Safe to be around. Yeah.
Right. But there's a lot that goes into, and I wonder, of course, like you're sitting there with boys, can they grasp, the kind of larger power structure that they live within and what that gives them?
I think in the abstract, mostly no.
Uh-huh.
So it has to be things that they totally understand, completely ordinary, completely here and now, completely as basic as possible. And I've seen this happen many times as well. People going into schools, kind of like they've got all the buzzwords, they've got the jargon. Some may spend a few minutes explaining their pronouns at the start of a session or some similar work, etc. But ultimately, they then go on to talk about toxic masculinity to a group of boys who they don't know, and male privilege to a group of boys they don't know. And then they wonder when it all turns to shit. How can it not do? I mean, how can it not do? It's like the idea that you go into schools in deprived areas where maybe the kids haven't had breakfast, where maybe they haven't seen one or both of their parents for a few days, maybe they've never been on holiday, maybe they're looking after their disabled mum or dad, or nobody they know has got a job. How can somebody who's clearly middle class, university background, come in and tell them about their privilege? It's insane. That doesn't mean that their relative privilege to their sisters is not true. What would that look like in your postcode or your zip code? What would that look like on your walk to school? What would it look like on your Saturdays or Sundays? What does it look like on a bus? Have you ever been, a guy's walking past you and he tells you to take your earphones out so he can listen to your music? And the boy's got, no, what? Only if he wants to fight. They get it. They get that because they see it for what it is, which is an assault. They get it. Or if you say, have we ever been told to smile by a man on a bus? No. Do you think your sisters have been? Or do you think your girlfriends have been? Oh, yeah, all the time. Right. Could we call that something that we don't have to experience, but that they do? Which if you were to step back and you think, actually, it's probably easier and better for boys than for girls then, in that context. And just hope that kind of resonates, but it's got to be tiny. I think it's got to be tiny. It's got to mean something to them in their world. And that'll be different in rural India than it is in Manhattan. And it'll be different in Glasgow than it is in south of France. It'll just be different. But that's why people doing the work who know them and know their families and know their friends and know their histories are the best people to do the work, rather than this industry sending in young graduates talking bullshit. The conversation is doomed, but I think worse than doomed, because a dead end would be bad, but it's worse than a dead end. It's a resistance to any conversation that makes you feel there might be something there. So it's how do we approach the truth, a conversation about the truth, that it's just about truth seeking rather than lesson teaching.
You do talk about how important it is to be only boys, that it's not a mixed sex situation. And I'm wondering why you think that.
Anecdotally, in my experience, when I've delivered sessions for mixed sex in PSHEs, we call it in England, that kind of citizenship, relationship stuff, you have to manage the kind of conflict in the room. So you're talking about a thing and suddenly it becomes tribal. Just right there, and you've only got 50 minutes. Not to say you can't manage to get somewhere or something useful, but it almost like raises the volume of things without actually being able to direct it anywhere. It becomes performative, I think. I don't think it goes beyond the performance level. And I think it amplifies bravado to some extent, or it keeps some people quiet. And I would include some girls in that, of course. I don't mean that education should be single sex. If people want to do that, fine, but I'm not advocating for it. But I do think that there are definitely legitimate spaces and times, even within a co-ed school, where this is for boys. And there's a reason for that. And there's a benefit for it, and it provokes dialogue within itself. So I think as an experiment of being an all-male group, but I'm going to talk about the facilitators differently, if that's okay. But in terms of members of the group being male, it's about what is there in common? What does the world want of you? How does it feel to be you? And I think you can go deeper, quicker with a single-sex group of men and boys. And I think there are lots of caveats to that, however. And one of them is that some boys don't feel that they can be open with men because of their life experience. And also, some boys cannot get over, if they're asked to have these kinds of dialogues with a woman, they can't get over what they've learned already and they won't bring anything positive to it. So when I started the work, I thought Men at Work would be loads of teachers, male youth workers who can have good rapport with the boys and speak with them in ways that are familiar and maybe even talk about your own life a little bit in an appropriate way. I thought familiarity was the key.
Mm-hmm.
And when it works, it does work. And that is a plus. But the reality of the public sector in England, certainly, is that in early years, which is up to 4 years, like nursery, kindergarten, it's 98% female staff, 2% male. And then primary is about 84%. Most of the office staff, the receptionists, the school nurse is always a woman. That's the reality of who works with our boys. And social work, 80-odd% again. Youth work, really struggling in England to recruit young men. So the sector, the whole body of professionals who in my mind would be the ones who would be facilitating this work are very largely women. So my idea of Men at Work is actually more honestly, loads of women and some men at work. But anyway, these young men are at work. They're thinking about who they are and what the world wants them to be. So I've trained 3,200 professionals in 4 years. I only do small numbers, so mostly no bigger than 18, because then that wouldn't be a dialogue. If I was trying to train 100 people online, they happen and it's big business, but it's not good, it's not honest, it's not ethical, I don't think. In my mind, an ideal situation would be a kind of tag team of a man and a woman who can do pro-social modelling in a program with a group of boys, maybe 8, 10 young men, young men, and take it in turns and model the thing that you were ultimately talking about, which is kind of an egalitarian coexistence.
Love that idea.
The practicalities of that, I think, in some schools are thinking, wow, getting one member of staff is hard enough, whoever it is. To get two, you got to be kidding. But that's because we live in a culture that doesn't prioritize what really matters. It sees it as a luxury rather than as a necessity. The other thing about the work is it's not intended as a punishment or as a post-vention after the fact. It's to try and get away from that by creating a space of curiosity and exploration and just reflection that is actually quite fun at times, because life is not always somber for everybody. But on the other hand, it's not about telling jokes and levity either. It's just about the up and down of life. And even within a 1 hour conversation, like you would know in your own life, you can be laughing and crying. So in my wildest dreams, these 3,000 people, I hope there's a core who find the time in the midst of everything else to carve out intentional spaces with particular groups who are not feeling like they're being picked on or punished or told off, but that it's a kind of an opportunity for them to think and to breathe in the eye of the storm.
And I can imagine men or young men coming up now do get quite a bit of messages that they are not safe because they're boys, and their self-concept may feel less than positive because there is so much, you are the threat, you are violent, you are the problem, that sort of messaging. How do you counter that?
That's such a big and complex, multi-layered question and point that I try really hard in the training that I do to make it clear that the initial overture is really important. The language used is really important. So if you start a conversation seemingly in the heat of an incident or headline chasing or in the wake of a popular drama on Netflix, for example,
Yeah.
it's not rocket science for the kid to think, you think I'm like that. You think I'm going to do that. You think I've already done it. Therefore, what any human being, are they not going to become defensive and reject the conversation? Mostly. Very few would think, oh, great, I'm glad we're talking about toxic masculinity. I've been really looking forward to this. Hooray. Me and my friends speak of nothing else. But you say this sometimes to people and they look at you and think, but that's what it is, isn't it? It's toxic masculinity. Going, well, since 1984, 1985, the white guys in New York had coined that phrase. Yeah, okay. But he was talking about his dad having a toxic masculinity. If you were to say to him, you know what, in 40 years, mate, in England, in little secondary schools, trainee teachers are going to be saying this to 15-year-old boys and then wondering why they get told to fuck off. So that's the nature of jargon jumping sharks, isn't it?
Yeah.
If we want to talk about the thing for which toxic masculinity is used as a shorthand, we have to talk longhand.
So true. So true.
We have to say it. What is it? Is it about bullying effeminate boys or what you call effeminate? Is that what it is? Is it about ritualistic drinking games? Is it about sending dick pics? Is it about making your girlfriend give her all your passwords to a social media? Is it about this? Is it about that? Right, let's talk about each one in detail. If we try and sum it up into this stupid 12, 13 letter bite piece, it goes wrong. It doesn't work. And also, it kind of reinforces a distance between us and the boys who we need to talk to and we want to talk with, because it's kind of adopting that mantle of expert and trying to remind them of that by using terms that they don't really understand. But also people like Andrew Tate talk freely about toxic masculinity in an ironic way and basically say to boys, they think you're poison. And then we foolishly walk through that Andrew Tate-shaped gap into a conversation with boys, and he's already framed the conversation for us because we're doing what he said we were going to do. I don't believe anybody's born bad. I don't believe in the mark of Cain. I don't believe in destiny. However, I know that most sexual assaults are committed by males. I know that most wars are more or less male affairs. I know that most murders are done by men. I know all of this stuff. Like we know all of this stuff. Both things are true. We've got history and we've got evidence. We have to make assumptions and informed kind of inferences from that there is something in the way that we learn how to be men, which elevates risk for us and for women and girls. That's just reality. It doesn't mean that the boys in a group are being accused of anything or almost trying to be defused like a bomb.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes it can come across a little bit like that. These are dangerous machines and we have to snip a few wires here and there. I mean, ultimately, what makes us human is our capacity for critical thought. One of the things, isn't it? So surely it's got to be about stimulating capacity for critical thought and empathy, and actually understanding the value of empathy through critical thought, critical thinking. Yeah, I use the metaphor of the sponge a lot in the training just to get away with it, because the sponge isn't a predator. If we squeeze the sponge, we can see what all the TV, the music, the films, the religion, the jokes, the birthday cards, the T-shirt slogans of this, the that. We can see what are the rules that have been put into us, and we can name them, but it doesn't mean we own them or that we do them all or we agree with them all. But we are familiar with them as boys and as men and as adult men. Therefore, we're just doing a stock take of what we are aware of that we've been given in our own little cultures. And the beauty of working in a multicultural or multi-ethnic setting is that there will be difference within the room, and commonality. And the commonality is the gathering thing. The obstacles are there for sure. Suspicion and worry from parents, carers. What are you saying about my boy? What are you saying to him? Cultural groups. Why you want to do this work with Muslim boys or Catholic boys or whoever the hell it is. And there are ways for that not to need to happen. If we say, well, what do we collectively want? What is our positive vision for these boys and young men? Let's spell it out. We want them to be safe in their daily life. We want them to have good friendships, to understand empathy, to be able to articulate complicated thoughts, to seek and nurture positive relationships with whoever they choose to be intimate with at the right time. We want them to be able to be resilient to toxic influence. We want them to make decisions that are genuinely their own and are not merely a function of membership of a group. And it should come across in your dialogue with the boys and young men that that's what you see for them. That's what you want for them. You're not just doing it because you've just watched adolescence.
Yeah, I want to get to that in a minute, but I wanted to just address, it's clear to me and maybe all feminists who listen to you or hear you, that feminism is part of your framework in some fashion. And I've heard you, mention several feminist writers and authors and thinkers. And so how did you discover feminism? Because it's kind of unusual for a man to discover feminism and to make it part of your belief system.
I'm not a feminist. I don't think men can be. Okay, I just want to be categorically clear about that.
Sure.
I think basically when I was growing up, the influence of my mom is strong in this because she had friends and they tend to be divorced women, I guess. So I was listening to conversations. We were a working class family, but my mum was very much an autodidact and then went to become a teacher. But there were books in the house. Books are ideas, aren't they? So there were ideas in the house and there were irreverent conversations in the house and there were thoughts from women in the house that cannot not matter. I was familiar with some of the ideas. God only knows feminist is such a broad term, as you know. I see people who call themselves feminists absolutely ripping each other apart, just as Catholics do, just as Muslims do, just as communists do, just as everybody does who have a common umbrella above them. So the diversity of feminism is so enormous. But I guess I know that because I study it quite closely, but in a study with a small s. I try, if other men talk about being feminist, I try and ask them, do you not think it would be good for us as men that we actually didn't try and claim something for ourselves that wasn't ours? We would develop the ability not to go beyond our boundaries and to recognize boundaries. And actually, that would be, if you want to use this phrase, pro-feminist. I don't even use that phrase. I can't be arsed. I don't even talk about masculinity.
Yeah, no.
It's like, what's the real thing here we're talking about?
Yeah. I get your allergy to jargon, and I appreciate that because I think it stands in the way of understanding sometimes to label things.
It can, for sure, but it's complicated. I've read some Dworkin, and it's hard to disagree with much of it, all of it. I get it. I do believe that porn is a propaganda of male supremacy. I do believe that. I think that's actually what it is. It's not a recreational tool. It actually is that. That's what it's for.
But that means that when you're talking to boys about porn, that is your understanding of it.
Yeah, absolutely. But if I was to tell them that, it wouldn't decrease their likelihood of consuming it for the rest of their lives. It just wouldn't. It'd just make them think I was a wanker. That's all it would do. I would feel good. I would feel righteous. Righteousness is the enemy of progress.
Yeah, no,
it's a
truly,
selfish emotion, I think. And it's just why people stand there. No, I will talk about toxic masculinity because I know what it means. It's like, well, is this all about you? Or are you not trying to engage young minds and bodies in living safely and well. So feminism, yeah, it's a tricky one for me to say. Apart from, I tend to nod along more with radical feminism. I don't nod along with liberal feminism at all because it's so contradictory. I'm completely porn critical and completely opposed to pimping and prostitution of women and men. And that generally takes you out of the liberal consensus and into a more hardline radical. Fine, don't matter. It's just logical to me.
I tend to think of it not as hardline, more so than just like back to roots and basics, rather than a lot of the convoluted co-optation that has happened in the last
I think that's a better way of saying it. Absolutely. It's kind of back to basics. Yeah. Radical roots. Absolutely.
Yeah. So how do you convince a boy to examine misogyny, another label, in a world that hates women, in a world that is so clearly misogynistic? So how do you thread that needle?
By honestly trying to listen and to find out what is layering in their mind, what they are listening to, what they're watching, what their friends are saying, how they're choosing their friendships. And well, try and move away from the abstract and into the concrete. You know, like looking out of the window in a school. Describe the playground. What can you see? There's loads of girls stood at the sides, and there's maybe 100 girls in little lines, and there are 20 boys playing football. So what percentage of the playground or the playing field have the boys got? Well, 80% or 90%. That's interesting because there's only 20 of them. So if you were to look at that and think, is that a fair spread? What would you think? If you were a girl, what do you think? And they go, well, they don't like playing football. You'll get all of those responses. I get it. It's just whatever is going to work has to be what they can see.
You have to be concrete, is what you're saying.
100% concrete. So what do you do on a Saturday night? Oh, get a takeaway. All right, you get it delivered. Yeah, usually. Oh, I go and get it. All right, where do you go? I'll go up Station Hill. Oh, okay. What'd you get? Chinese or Indian? Well, it's usually Chinese. Oh, okay, you go and get it. Yeah, why didn't you got a sister, haven't you? Yeah, why didn't she go and get it? Oh, she can't go out at night. You know, just stuff like that. But you have to know the boys to do that. You can't be a stranger. So I don't mean you have to know them intimately, know all their families, but you have to have some familiarity with their context so that their context offers you the examples that you need to talk through. So I would never go from a position of, I need to talk to these boys about misogyny. It's more like, let's get to know this group of boys and then hear things in what they say that can be, in a strengths-based way, reflected back to them. I'm getting that you really value honesty, mate. That's great. It's so much life, so much easier if everybody's honest, aren't they? And we could think about lying and why people lie and all of that. I just try and get to the basics. One of them will come from an example of OnlyFans. Lots and lots of boys are convinced that all women who are in OnlyFans are millionaires.
Yeah.
They're millionaires. They love it. They wouldn't do it if they didn't enjoy it. They're the boss. The men are just the customer, all of that stuff. I once tried to counter-argue that position. I was saying, yeah, but here are some facts. That was one of the reasons that I stopped bothering trying to do that anymore, because it's not about facts, it's about feelings. So the question then in a successive group wasn't ever, do you believe that 95% of women earn less than $100 a week? It wasn't any of that. It's just, who cares about that, unfortunately? Nobody's listening to statistics, really. The question started with, why do people believe what they believe?
Yeah.
And that was such an interesting question. And I asked myself, why do I believe what I believe? You know, is it because it's factually true? Or is it because people you want to be with say they believe it? Is it because people you love and trust believe it? So we've learned what they'd learned. Or is it because it suits you? Having that conversation that had nothing to do with OnlyFans at all allowed, I think 2 or 3 weeks later, an opportunity to talk about OnlyFans that referred back to why we believe what we believe. And I think I'd said something along the lines of, Did you know that 99% of stats are made up?
Yeah,
I think I said
that's how
something
you
like,
believe what you believe.
was it 99.6%? And I said something along the lines of, did you know that 81% of boys believed that 95% of women in OnlyFans earned $500,000 a year? And they're going, huh? So we were thinking it through. We're thinking, but here are some facts that suggest that that's not true. And it was, survivor testimony, age appropriate, just some facts. I said, so what? How can we explain this difference? Because we got what looks like reality and something that looks like not reality. He also talks about the tobacco industry and the petrol industry saying that they were safe and they were okay. And we're saying, why do companies who sell you stuff that is really shit for you, why do they do it? And go, well, they want to make money. Yeah, right, okay, good.
What you learn in journalism school, question your source, always question the source.
Right. And that is such an issue now because there are so many sources that seem credible and they are algorithmically hypnotizing you. So that was a learning thing for me is there's no point me trying to play ping pong with statistics. They've pulled it out of their arse. I can pull it out of my arse. They say, oh, Andrew Tate says X, Y, and Z. I can say the opposite and it will never get anywhere. But if you can try and get to the basis of it about why do we do this biased belief thing? What's it about? Because then we won't feel so bad in questioning our own beliefs then, because we've already accepted and said categorically that we do it for a whole range of reasons, some of which are just that it suits us. So why do we think those boys, why do you think they were so willing to believe that? They probably just wanted to keep watching the material and not feel bad about it. Well, it's funny that feeling bad. So maybe if an industry has got a lot of women in it and the industry's telling you that they're earning loads of money, but in fact the women or a lot of the women are saying they don't earn that at all, apart from a few famous examples, then maybe actually keeping that going by paying and watching and sharing and all that, maybe that is something that you wouldn't want to do.
What about making them question how the girls feel or how the women feel doing it?
Absolutely. In an industry where the industry is presenting them as happy and empowered and rich, when so many are saying the opposite. So what might lead them to be doing that kind of work? And that opens up the conversations. So in a way, I know it might sound a bit naff. It's kind of like philosophy for boys.
I was just going to say that, this is like opening their mind and questioning, just unpacking how they got to the ideas that they have and equipping them with that critical thinking skill is like the key to everything.
If you can just nurture a bit of it and it's enough little guttering flame to keep going in the next few years when they go off to work or they get partners, have kids, go to university, whatever they do, if they've got that capacity a bit, then it will develop, hopefully, rather than a failed series of you shouldn't do that, this is bad. A lecture is not something that you take away with you for the rest of your life, whereas the capacity to think critically, I think, is.
I do want to get to adolescence, and I know you're probably sick of talking about it.
About a month ago, it was just 24/7.
Yeah, it really touched a nerve. My first question to you is why do you think it did touch such a nerve? Why did people get so obsessed with it?
It's a well-made thing. It's as an artifact. It's a drama. It's well-made. Tick. People like well-made TV. It's just kind of kitchen sink, gritty. And I know that it's been watched around the world. I mean, phenomenal global success. That I can't explain so much. But in an English-speaking context, I can have more of a guess about, really. High-quality drama. Looks good. Cinematography, great. The boy is a fabulous actor. In fact, all the acting, I think, is good. But that doesn't quite explain it. Part of it is that it taps into the fear of parents and adults generally that their children are living a world they don't understand. So it's almost a kind of visceral horror film for parents.
Mm-hmm.
And that's who it's meant for. It's an adult show. So this is why I felt I had to, with a tiny platform, I got a little thing to say, don't show this in schools. What a moronic, disaster, stupid, empty, shallow gesture. But worse than all of those things, counterproductive. You can cope with stupid, but counterproductive means more harm. I think if it were done uniformly, it would create more harm and more abuse.
Can you elaborate on that?
Yeah, I think it would be used in imprecise and insensitive ways with large groups for whom it was not intended. It's about kids, it's not for them.
Yeah.
And I think that sometimes is a bit of a mind game that some people can't see the difference between. It's about them, it's not for them. It's not educational for them. It's not telling them anything new. It's telling parents that there is even more reason to be worried about what their kids are getting up to, but not really giving them any tools. Talking about incels. Yeah, incels is 1% of everything. Incels are far less dangerous than men with partners because incels don't have partners. And very few of that definable, if they are a definable group, become actively violent. I'm not saying that they are not a problem or a growing trend. They are. I get it. I understand the dimensions of it a bit. But women are killed by their partners or ex-partners. They're not killed by men who've never had sex, usually. So I'm just thinking, is this another wild goose chase, a red herring of a new kind of monster? The incel is a monster. And we can stop the monster growing if we learn some emojis.
Yeah.
It just seems so facile. And there is nothing at all in that about the digital capitalist global structure which feeds that shit into boys' heads.
Not the least of which is pornography and OnlyFans, like you
Absolutely.
talked, and Bop House and whatever else. I feel like the incel, like you said, is like a microscopic part of their digital diet.
Absolutely. And the real harms, the physical real world harms, are much more done by your partner. The idea that we should have such a massive national reaction, global reaction, but there wasn't an iota in it that was new to any politician at all. We know about incels. They know about radicalization. They know about the commonalities between young men who are prone to being groomed into gangs, Islamic fundamentalism, white supremacy. People know it. It's not mysterious. There's nothing new. There's nothing new about the fact that a slightly distant dad can be every bit as problematic as one who isn't there at all. We get it. And kids shouldn't go to bed with their phones. There's nothing new about it at all. And it's only because of the popular reaction that politicians said anything and claimed to have watched it and all of that. But the reason for the popular reaction, I think, is partly because of the power of the narrative, which happened to be about this thing. But I think the power of the one thing, the acting and the pacing and the camera work, fed the thing it was about. But at the same time, its deficit is but what about the girl? Where's her story?
That was my reaction. One, the fact that she was so vague a figure and not fleshed out, and also that we didn't get to know her, but also that it was kind of, I wouldn't say like she was blamed for her own murder, but they found some kind of reason that she had bullied him and rejected him. And so
her voice and what would have led her to telling him to jog on, which is fair enough. You can do that. One can do that. There would have been reasons for that because he was treating her in a particular way, or loads of other boys were, and all of that. But that was unexplored and unexplained. It was just frozen in. She sent him some emojis, which somebody else interpreted as bullying. And that's just left floating, isn't it? When really it's the fact that young men, not 13, again, he was very young. I thought that was unrepresented.
very young, 15. Also weird.
I think a couple of years older would have made more sense and have been more true. But it opened up a can of worms of racist responses to it, which were much more concerned with the fact that the boy was white than anything else. They're not concerned about the absence of the girl. They're not concerned about the content of what might have driven him to it. That's really all they did. And that was enormous up to a couple of weeks ago. It was like the main kind of massive kind of conflict around it.
Yeah. I'm surprised they didn't bring in porn and sexual exploitation, because that was an open door.
It was. Porn is much more influential than so many men, young men and boys, than the small number who find that they are drawn into incel type discourse
The
and
manosphere.
forums. Absolutely, yeah.
Another thing that spoke to me as a woman, and I think many other women too watching Adolescence, it got right, was that the women character, the woman psychologist, police psychologist, but also the mother and the sister, were kind of shock absorbers for not just his rage at being rejected, but also shock absorbers for the father's outbursts. I don't know if they intended that or not.
They probably didn't intend it. And I think that's probably because it was written by two men. They probably didn't intend it because it just seems normal.
That's how it felt.
It's a fable, it's a fable. And I think it should be treated as such and has no place whatsoever being blanketly rolled out. However, there is no question that little snippets of it, sensitively and properly thought through for particular groups at particular times, could open up wonderful dialogue. There's no question about that. But even by asking, but what about her? That would be a use of it in a sense about what doesn't it say. But I do know that in the wake of it in recent weeks, schools in England have been receiving their lists of emojis and all of that sort of thing. And you just think, oh, gosh.
Back to jargon again, these like faddish, gimmicky things that really doesn't affect how we behave, that doesn't inform. They're just like the symptoms of what's going on.
Yeah, Andrew Tate, in a sense, is like a tiny figure on a mountain. And we look at it and we think, oh, he's the mountain. He's not the mountain. He's like the little thing on the top. Take away the pre-brain work on boys that porn does. Take that out of the picture. There's not much else to it, really. Porn creates low-hanging fruit for people like him because the work he's done, they've seen it. Their synapses have developed in certain ways that tell them in a non-verbal way that they, as the male viewer and doer, is the subject and that the woman as the recipient is the object. And he just kind of puts some words to that. I really would like to be able to do an experiment where a boy who'd never watched porn at all or anything pornified was then presented with Andrew Tate in a control group against others, and to think, would they go along with what he said in the same way? I'm going to say I think they wouldn't, because I think that's where the work is done, the pornification of the view between men and women, so that clowns like him come along and say stuff that is, nothing new or insightful or anything, can appear kind of compelling and kind of persuasive.
We did not talk about gender ideology.
Oh, right. Okay.
I'm a little bit interested in how you navigate gender ideology in this space that you're in.
Yeah, it's a good question because it would appear to be central. I speak about sex as sex all the time. Only ever have done. I've never, ever strayed from that.
As opposed to gender.
I talk about gender as gender stereotyping. Anyway, so I've always been ready for straightforward conversation during the training with the professionals. I don't bring it up because I talk about boys and men and sex and women and girls and sex. I don't talk gibberish about queer theory. I'm not going to speak their language. I'm not going to do it. I'm not going to do it by introducing it as something I don't believe in. I've had 4 conversations where I've actually said, okay, folks, you know what? We do have to confront this. It's a big conversation. And I don't try and proselytize. I don't try and tell people they're wrong. I just say, this is me. This is my position. The discourse online is not necessarily what happens in real life. If you're working with young men who are in gangs or lads who are self-harming or whatever, you're doing that work. You're not wasting your time talking gibberish about 76 different genders. You're doing the thing, you're doing that. I just think most people are rational. If you approach them rationally and you talk about concrete reality to them, only a very, very few will insist on railroading you into something else because others know what you're saying chimes with their experience of material reality. And actually, you're giving them a chance to breathe a bit because sometimes they might be surrounding people who don't give them that opportunity. I've been no platformed a few times from meetings, from conferences a few times. The weird thing is, being self-employed, it's hard to know because you just wouldn't get the gig. But I've been pretty busy, to be fair, and I'm totally clear. My Twitter account is 100% clear and always has been, absolutely pro material reality. I don't call myself gender critical and never have because I think, well, I'm poverty critical as well, but I've never called myself poverty critical.
Yes.
I mean, I'm pollution critical. It doesn't make sense to me. Again, it's a label I have no interest in whatsoever. It's about material reality. It's about male bodies and female bodies and the information that comes into those bodies and leads to certain outcomes. So I've not really had to navigate it, is the answer to your question.
Yeah, but it sounds like you've also made your position kind of clear and concrete. And so, again, like people know where you stand. So,
yeah, if they have any interest and they look at anything that I ever say, all right, they will know that I'm completely critical of queer theory. And I think it's intellectually, well, I don't even want to use the word intellectual in its presence because it's anti-intellectual,
they don't go together.
pseudo-religious, misogynistic horse shit. Because it uses fancy terms and words, but it's like why the mass used to be in Latin, so you never knew really what it was about. It's just a way of tricking people, and it's deeply homophobic, and I think it is almost always borderline, if not explicitly pro-paedophilia. So that's my take on it.
That's very clear, yeah.
Yeah, so I was never, ever going to give it a moment. The closest I came was when I naively tried to do something positive by signing up to Stonewall in 2014, I think it was. But I quickly rectified that.
What happened with that?
Oh, it was fascinating. I got Ian McKellen to our school. Yeah, Gandalf, he did a great thing. And to be honest, it was fascinating. This is true. But while he was talking to some of the kids in the school I was at, he had somebody from Stonewall with him, a younger man, because obviously Sir Ian, he's quite an elderly chap. And he was talking about gays and lesbians, bisexuals, and there was a from his handler, and he looked over and went, "Oh," he said, "Of course, trans as well." He said, "Whatever that is." He whispered it, yeah, and I was there, and I was hosting it, and it was fascinating because I'd already cottoned on, but it took ages to get it arranged, and I'm not going to stop Gandalf coming to school. I mean, what kind of prude do I want to be doing that? And it was a fascinating day, and it was good, and some gay kids were really happy about it, which I thought was fab. It was a really interesting, some gay staff too. That it was a good thing, but it was interesting seeing that him as a member of old school Stonewall and the newer managerial class reminding him that he had to stay on message. And there's a little anecdote about showbiz.
So in essence, their agenda became transgenderism.
Pretty much overnight. It was in 2015. Other people have written about it, chapter and verse, but it was in the tenure of Ruth Hunt, who is now, of course, Baroness Hunt of Walthamstow. And she basically embraced the T at the cost of the L, the G, and the B, and opened the way for the Q, the plus, the I. The plus should be the straw that breaks a camel's back. Is there an infinite number of pluses? And at what point do you go, no. But they made so many millions. Just amusing to have watched their kind of arc, huge rise, and very much quieter now, very much kind of fighting a rearguard action against the Supreme Court clarification of the Equalities Act in the UK some weeks ago. which is good and it's useful, but it was always true. It was just that it was misrepresented by organisations like Stonewall and Mermaids and Gendered Intelligence and all the others who made a lot of dollar, and to some extent still do, but much less so, less openly and less flagrantly than they did in the peak, which was about 17, 18, 19, 20, 2021. And then there started to be tribunals, there started to be legal cases, which I've supported in every way I could do, whatever, a few quid now and then, or just sharing stuff and signing petitions where women have been, it's almost always women, not always, but have been sacked.
Mostly.
Yeah, been sacked, they've been harassed, they've been misrepresented. But I've been really pleased that most of those cases have been won because they are reality, the material reality, logic, and the law. So there's a bit of a cultural jarring moment. But for me, I just trundle along in the same way as I ever did. And what we're here to talk about, folks, in the training is how can we best support our boys and young men to be safe and to be safe to be around. And if somebody says, what do you mean by boy? I say, I mean boy, a young male human being. That's what I mean by boy. That's what we're here to talk about, because this is too important to be derailed by drivel. Just not having it.
No, and I appreciate that. One last question. What's the most rewarding part of this work for you?
Finding out that a year or 2 years after having done some training with somebody, that they are still doing the work. Or that they tried it, it didn't work, but they didn't give up, they tried again, and they found a different way to do it. Or occasionally I get an email from somebody saying, I did some training in 2021 with you. I used to work here, but now I've moved 300 miles away to a different school. Can I still do it? I go, oh, yeah, of course you can. That's that. Great. It's your knowledge. You take it away. You know, like that it's on somebody's agenda.
Yeah.
That they're thinking about it and they want to continue with it. Occasionally, I bump into a lad who might now be 21, 22, 23, who I might have worked with when he was 14, 15, 16. And we have a little chat about stuff we talked about then. And that's nice. He doesn't think, oh, shit, it's him. He was talking about toxic masculinity. It's more like, you know, there's something pleasing. It's not scientific. You do what you can in the moment.
Thank you so much for talking with me this long. And such an interesting conversation. And I love the work that you're doing.
Oh, thank you. I really appreciate it. And I'm sorry if some of these almost uneditably garbled responses.
But I'll find a way.
Yeah. Get someone to dub it. Yeah.
All right.
Lovely. Have a nice weekend.
Yeah, you too. Take
Cheers.
care.
Bye.
Okay. Thank you for listening to Subject to Power. You can find the show online at subjecttopower.com or subscribe to the show wherever you find your podcasts. I'd love to know your thoughts on these conversations, so please drop a note on the website or find us on social media. The best way to support the show is to rate and review Subject to Power on Apple Podcasts. It really helps other listeners find us. Subject to Power is written, hosted, and produced by me, El Kamihira. Audio engineering is done by Jason Sheasley at Abridged Audio. Cover art by B. Johnson, and music by Beware of Darkness.